Welcome to Curiosity, the podcast where science meets wonder. Join us as we explore the fascinating, the innovative, and the unexpected, from the secrets of the cosmos to the marvels of everyday life. Each episode takes you on a journey to uncover the knowledge and stories that fuel our endless quest for understanding. Let your curiosity guide you.
Imagine for a moment tasting the word Tuesday as, I don't know, buttered toast. Or maybe seeing the number 5, not just as the shape, but as inherently, undeniably crimson red.
Right. For most people, that sounds like, poetry, a metaphor.
Exactly, the literary device.
But for actually a surprising number of people, those aren't metaphors at all. They're genuine, automatic, involuntary, perceptual facts, just as real as the color of the chair you're sitting on right now.
So we're launching a deep dive today into this phenomenon, synesthesia. The word itself comes from Greek syn, together, and aesthesis, sensation.
Sensations together.
Yeah, it's a neurological thing where basically stimulating one sense, or even a concept like a letter, automatically triggers a totally predictable experience in a different sense or pathway.
And it really throws a wrench into that neat idea we have of 5 distinct senses operating in their own little boxes.
Yes, absolutely. And exploring that challenge, that's really our mission today. We've got sources digging into the neuroscience, the genetics, the cultural side of it too.
Our goal is to really understand this cross-wiring, what's actually happening in the brain, what causes it, and how does it fundamentally challenge our basic assumptions about how we all perceive reality.
We're looking at the science behind reality that is just consistently radically different for some people.
But first, and this is really crucial, we need to be clear about what synesthesia isn't.
Right. Important ground rules.
It is not a disorder. It's not a disease. And it is absolutely, definitely not a hallucination. It's a consistent, lifelong difference in how someone's brain processes the world. A different but stable mode of perception.
That stability and the fact that it's involuntary, that seems key. That's what separates it from just making an association.
Exactly. That's the core distinction. I mean, if I ask anyone, what color is A? They might say red. Why? A is for apple. Apples are red. That's a learned choice, a memory link.
A conscious connection.
Right. But for a genuine synesthete, say, someone with sound-to-color synesthesia, hearing a specific musical note instantly triggers a color experience. They don't think about it, they don't will it, it just happens. And it's vivid, like any other sensory input.
And there's also a difference in where they experience it, isn't there? You hear about projectors and associators.
Yes, that's an important distinction researchers make. A projector synesthete might literally see the color, say red, projected out into the world, maybe overlaying the letter A on a page, or seeming to hover near the source of a sound.
Wow, so it's externalized.
It can be, yeah. Whereas an associator experiences that same vivid red just as strongly, but internally, in their mind's eye space. It's strongly felt, just not localized outside their body.
But either way, projector or associator, the experience itself is real to them and incredibly consistent over time.
Decades.
Yeah.
That consistency is neurologically real.
Okay, let's unpack this more. Let's dive into the gallery of cross wires, because the sheer variety here is kind of mind-blowing. Researchers talk about, over 80 different types?
At least. Yeah, the number keeps growing as we understand more. We should definitely spotlight some of the most common and maybe a few of the really intriguing ones. This is where you see the real impact on daily life.
Absolutely. Where should we start? The classic one.
Well, let's start with the heavy hitter, the most studied, probably most prevalent form. Grapheme color synesthesia.
Right, this is the one most people have heard of. Colored letters, colored numbers.
Precisely. For these individuals, letters, numbers, or sometimes both, just are colored, inherently. A is red, 7 is green, whatever it might be.
But crucially, my A isn't necessarily your A, even if we both have it.
Not at all. The specific palette is incredibly individualized. You could have 2 grapheme color synesthetes sitting next to each other, looking at the same letter, and one sees it as bright blue, the other insists it's muddy brown. Their personal color alphabets are unique.
So the subjective experience is totally personalized. But for that person, their red A is always that specific red A.
That's the hallmark. The consistency of the exact shade, maybe even the texture or brightness of the color associated with the specific grapheme, is maintained for 50 years. 60 years, their entire life. Researchers rely heavily on this stability for diagnosis.
And that projector-associator thing applies here too. Reading could be literally colorful.
For projector, yes. Reading a page of black text can be a visually multicolored experience, with the synesthetic color sort of shimmering on or around the letters. For an associator, the color experience is just as strong and automatic, but perceived internally alongside the shape of the letter.
You can immediately see how that might be. Well, a bit much sometimes. Sensory overload.
It can be, yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's move to one that's had a huge impact on the arts. Chromesthesia. Sound to color.
Right. This is where sounds, not just music, but maybe voices, environmental noises too, evoke distinct colors. Sometimes shapes, sometimes even patterns of movement. Extremely high impact for musicians, obviously.
And there's that great anecdote about Franz Liszt, the composer.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant. Liszt reportedly had chromesthesia back in the 19th century. And the story goes, he used to completely baffle his orchestra during rehearsals.
How so?
He'd give them directions like, "Gentlemen, could you please play that passage a little bluer?" Or he'd insist a section needed to be more pink.
Imagine being a violinist hearing that.
Exactly. They must have thought he was mad. He was trying to translate his visual perception of the sound into instructions, likely assuming, perhaps, that they saw the music the same way he did.
And it's not just historical figures.
No, not at all. Loads of contemporary musicians talk about it. Pharrell Williams, Billie Eilish, the late Eddie Van Halen spoke about perceiving music visually, seeing structures and colors that directly fed into how they wrote and arranged. It's a creative tool for them.
Okay, so sound can trigger color. What about words triggering taste? That sounds even more unusual. Lexical gustatory synesthesia.
This one's quite rare, yeah. Really fascinating. Specific words, or even just phonemes, the basic sounds of speech trigger distinct involuntary taste sensations.
Not just like a memory of a taste, but an actual physical taste.
An actual taste. It could be sweetness, sourness, bitterness, saltiness, or even complex flavor profiles. Someone might consistently taste, say, chocolate when they hear the word telephone, or maybe get a sharp sour taste whenever they read or hear the name Derek.
Wow. That seems challenging. I mean, if you're just having a normal conversation, are you constantly tasting things?
Pretty much, yes. And that's the difficulty. The tastes are automatic, consistent, they just happen. This can lead to people actively avoiding certain words because they taste unpleasant.
Like steering conversations.
Exactly. Researchers have documented cases where synesthetes try to subtly guide conversations away from words that trigger, I don't know, the taste of earwax or bitter ash. It really highlights how, while synesthesia can be cool, it can also have significant functional downsides.
Okay, if words can trigger taste, what about something more abstract like time? Let's talk about spatial sequence synesthesia.
This one is often a huge cognitive benefit. It's where sequences, numbers, dates, months of the year, timelines are perceived as occupying specific locations in space, often in elaborate 3D arrangements.
You mean like the year isn't just a concept, it's a shape?
Exactly. A spatial sequence synesthete might perceive the calendar year as, say, a giant oval or ellipse looping around their body. Maybe January is near their left shoulder, July is out in front, and it moves counterclockwise.
Or numbers arranged in lines or stacks.
Yes, numbers might march up a hill, or be arranged in specific jagged lines, or form a complex lattice in the space around them. Each number, each month, has its own fixed spatial address.
The relevance here seems obvious. It's like having a built-in, effortless memory palace.
It really is. They don't have to consciously memorize the order of months or historical dates. Their brain automatically anchors every piece of sequential information to a specific visual spatial location. It's an inherent organizational structure.
So retrieving information is like pointing to a spot on their mental map.
Kinda, yeah. If you ask them about something that happened last June, they might mentally look towards the spot where June exists on their spatial map, and the associated memories are right there. It makes recall incredibly fast and accurate for sequential information.
Okay, one more major type we should definitely touch on. Mirror touch synesthesia. This sounds like, well, extreme empathy, potentially.
It's definitely one of the most emotionally intense forms, yeah.
Yeah.
A mirror touch synesthete experiences tactile sensations on their own body simply by observing someone else being touched.
So if they see someone get tapped on the shoulder,
they feel a corresponding tap on their own shoulder, usually in the same location mirrored.
The immediate implication is, yeah, a vastly heightened sense of physical empathy. But the sources mention this can be incredibly overwhelming, especially in crowds.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being on a busy train or in a crowded room. You're vicariously feeling every accidental brush, every handshake, every itch scratched, every hug happening around you. It's a constant barrage of physical sensation.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be deeply taxing. While the mechanism might enhance compassion, you literally feel what others feel physically. The sheer volume of sensory input can lead to significant anxiety, social avoidance, and distress when witnessing injuries, or even just routine physical contact.
And these are just some of the main types. These sources briefly mention others too, like ordinal linguistic personification, letters having personalities.
Yeah, where numbers or letters or days of the week have distinct genders, personalities, even relationships with each other. 4 might be shy, Monday might be grumpy, and then there are even rarer forms like smelling colors or tasting shapes. The complexity is staggering.
And people can have multiple types at once, right? Layered experiences.
Very common, actually. Someone might have colored letters and see music as shapes, for example. It really shows how interconnected perception can be.
Which brings us to the brain itself. How does this happen? Why are some brains wired this way? There are a couple of main theories trying to explain it neurologically.
Right. The foundational one, the one that really got the modern neuroscience of synesthesia going, is the cross-activation theory. It's strongly associated with the neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran.
Okay, let's spend a bit of time on this. Cross-activation, what's the core idea?
It's fundamentally about brain geography, about anatomical closeness. The theory proposes that synesthesia arises because of increased or sort of leaky communication between brain areas that are physically right next to each other in the cortex, areas that normally do separate jobs.
And the classic example involves those colored letters again, grapheme color.
Exactly. That's the poster child for this theory. If you look at brain maps, the region that processes the visual form of letters and numbers, it's part of the fusiform gyrus, is located immediately adjacent to the brain area specialized for processing color, which is called area V4.
So they're neighbors?
Close neighbors. Ramachandran's theory suggests that in synesthetes there are more connections, sort of extra wiring, bridging these two areas, or alternatively, that the normal process of getting rid of temporary connections during development didn't quite finish the job between these two spots.
You're talking about synaptic pruning?
Precisely. Think of a baby's brain as having connections going absolutely everywhere, a massive tangled web of potential pathways. Development involves pruning back the connections that aren't needed, strengthening the ones that are, leading to specialized areas.
Like trimming a bush to make it grow properly.
Good analogy, yeah. The idea is that in synesthetes, maybe the pruning between the letter area, fusiform gyrus, and the color area, V4, was incomplete. Some of those extra connections that most infants lose just stick around into adulthood.
Creating a permanent crosstalk pathway.
A short circuit, effectively. So activation in the letter region automatically spills over and triggers activation in the color region.
And we have solid proof. This isn't just imagination, right? Brain scans show something real is happening.
Yes, that's critical. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, studies have provided really strong evidence. You put a grapheme color synesthete in the scanner, show them plain black and white letters.
No actual color input to the eyes.
None at all. But their color processing area, V4, lights up anyway. It activates as if they were actually looking at colors. This confirms the experience is genuinely sensory at a neural level. The brain is processing color information triggered by the shape of the letter alone.
Okay, that makes a strong case for the cross-activation, the structural link. But there's another major theory, right? The disinhibited feedback theory. How does that fit in?
Right. While cross-activation focuses on that side-to-side leakage between adjacent areas, disinhibited feedback looks more at the top-down control systems in the brain.
What do you mean by top-down?
Our brains don't just process information passively from the senses upwards. There are also massive feedback pathways running from higher-level cognitive areas where we understand concepts like that shape is the letter A back down to the lower-level sensory processing areas.
So our understanding of something can influence how we perceive it.
Exactly. Normally, these feedback connections are very carefully controlled, modulated, often inhibited to prevent chaos. The disinhibited feedback theory suggests that in synesthetes, this normal inhibition is weaker. It's disinhibited.
Letting the signals flow more freely backwards.
Precisely. This allows the signals from the higher conceptual areas to exert an unusually strong influence on the primary sensory cortices. So the concept of the letter A, once identified, feeds back strongly enough to actually trigger activity in the color area V4.
Ah, okay. And this might explain some forms better than cross-activation, like the taste one.
It provides a potentially better explanation for synesthesias where the trigger is more abstract or conceptual, like lexical gustatory. Tasting a word seems less likely to be due to adjacent brain areas and more likely related to the concept of the word feeding back inappropriately to taste centers.
So maybe it's not one theory versus the other. They could both be true, explaining different types or aspects.
That's the way the thinking is heading now, yeah. They're likely complementary. Cross-activation might be key for things like grapheme color, where adjacency is clear, while disinhibition might be more relevant for connections between more distant or conceptual areas. Both point to a fundamental difference in neural organization.
And this different organization isn't just theoretical. We can actually see structural differences. You mentioned white matter earlier.
Yes, studies using diffusion tensor imaging, or DTI, are really important here. DTI is a type of MRI that tracks the movement of water molecules along nerve fibers.
The brain's wiring, essentially.
Exactly. It maps out the white matter, tracks the bundles of insulated axons that act like the brain's data cables, connecting different regions. And consistently, DTI studies find that synesthetes tend to have increased connectivity, sort of denser or more robust white matter pathways, particularly between the sensory regions involved in their specific type of synesthesia.
So physically more connections or stronger connections.
Both have been suggested. Higher integrity, maybe more insulation, allowing for faster, more efficient signal transfer between areas that are usually more separate. It provides concrete, physical evidence supporting the idea that their brains are structurally organized differently, facilitating this cross-sensory communication.
Okay, so the brain architecture is different. Where does that difference come from? That leads us to genetics and development, right?
Absolutely. It's very clear that synesthesia runs in families. If you have synesthesia, your immediate relatives, parents, siblings, children, are significantly more likely to have it than people in the general population. That's a strong sign of a genetic component.
But it's not like simple inheritance, like inheriting eye color. The sources say it's complex.
Very complex. It's definitely not a single synesthesia gene. The current understanding points towards it being polygenic, meaning it's influenced by multiple genes interacting with each other and probably interacting with environmental factors too.
So finding the specific genes is tricky.
It is. But research has suggested possible links to genes involved in really fundamental brain development processes. Things like neural migration, how neurons find their correct place in the developing brain. Axon guidance, how the connections, the wiring, actually gets laid down. And as we discussed, synaptic pruning, that process of refining the connections. Small variations in any of these processes could plausibly lead to the kind of atypical wiring we see in synesthesia.
What's really interesting is that even within a family, the type of synesthesia often varies.
That's a critical point. A mother might have grapheme color synesthesia, seeing colored letters, but her son might have chromesthesia, seeing colored sounds.
So you don't inherit the specific red A.
No. It suggests what's inherited isn't the specific cross-connection, but rather a general genetic tendency or predisposition towards developing atypical cross-sensory wiring. The inherited trait is a propensity to cross-wire, and then maybe development or experience shapes the specific form it takes.
Let's talk numbers then. Prevalence. It seems like it was hard to figure out how common it actually is for a long time.
Extremely hard. Because many synesthetes just assume everyone experiences the world the way they do. They might not realize their colored letters are unusual until they're adults, or maybe never. So early estimates based on people self-reporting were really low, maybe 1 in 2,000 or even less.
But that's changed with better testing.
Massively. And clear studies using more objective tests, particularly focusing on that retest consistency we talked about, suggest the rate is much, much higher. Some estimates now are as high as 1 in 200 people having some form of synesthesia. Maybe even more common, like 1 in 100 or even 1 in 23, depending on how broadly you define it. It's far more prevalent than previously thought.
And are there demographic patterns? Does it affect certain groups more?
Well, it's consistently reported more often by women than men. The ratio often cited in studies is around 3 to 1, women to men.
Why would that be?
That's debated. Is it a genuine biological difference, maybe related to hormones influencing brain development differently? Or is it a reporting bias? Are women perhaps more attuned to or more likely to talk about their internal sensory experiences? The jury's still out on that.
Interesting.
Any other groups?
There's also a noticeable link with autism spectrum conditions. Synesthesia appears to be significantly more common among individuals on the autism spectrum compared to the general population. This suggests there might be some shared underlying differences in sensory processing or patterns of neural connectivity between the two conditions.
Okay, shifting to how it develops, here's this really compelling idea called the infant hypothesis.
Right. Since most synesthetes say they've had it forever, for as long as they can remember, this hypothesis proposes that maybe all infants start out life experiencing the world in a much more synesthetic way.
Because their brains aren't fully specialized yet. Exactly. The sensory areas in an infant's brain are thought to be much more interconnected, less modular than in adults. So sights might trigger sounds, sounds might trigger touches, in a way that's normal for that developmental stage.
So we're all born synesthetes, potentially.
That's the idea. Then through typical development and that synaptic pruning process we keep mentioning, most of us lose these extra cross-sensory connections as our brain regions become more specialized. The infant hypothesis suggests that synesthetes are simply individuals who, for genetic reasons perhaps, retain some of these early cross-modal pathways into adulthood.
But wait, if it's innate wiring, how does environment play a role? You mentioned those alphabet magnets earlier.
This is where it gets really subtle and fascinating. While the potential to have synesthesia, the tendency to cross wire, seems to be innate or genetic, the specific content of the associations, like which color goes with which letter, often seems to be influenced by early learning experiences.
So the environment shapes the details.
It appears so. Researchers found these intriguing correlations. For example, the specific colors a grapheme color synesthete associates with letters often match the colors of a particular set of plastic alphabet refrigerator magnets or a specific alphabet book they had as a young child during that critical period when they were learning letters.
Wow. So if your A magnet was always red, that early consistent pairing might basically set the connection. It locks in the red A for life.
That seems to be the mechanism. The underlying genetic predisposition provides the fertile ground, the open neural highway, and then these strong, consistent early environmental inputs provide the specific mapping, determining exactly which color gets assigned to which letter or which taste to which word. Nature provides the canvas, nurture paints the details.
We've mostly talked about this developmental type, the kind people have had forever, but the sources also mention acquired synesthesia, people developing it later.
Yes, though it's much rarer than the developmental form. It gives us this unique, sometimes unfortunate glimpse into the brain's ability to rewire itself, even in adulthood neuroplasticity.
Are there temporary cases?
The most well-known temporary cases are those induced by psychedelic drugs, like LSD or psilocybin. These substances massively affect serotonin pathways and can temporarily disrupt normal sensory boundaries, leading to fleeting, intense, but usually inconsistent synesthetic-like experiences. Seeing sounds, hearing colors, that sort of thing.
But not the same lifelong consistency.
Generally not, no. More like a temporary scrambling of sensory signals. But then there are documented cases of permanent acquired synesthesia emerging later in life.
What causes that?
Often, sadly, it follows some kind of neurological event. It's been reported after specific types of brain injury, particularly damage involving the temporal or parietal lobes, also after strokes, sometimes linked to certain types of focal epilepsy, or even brain tumors.
How does injury trigger it?
The thinking is that the injury might either damage pathways that normally inhibit cross-sensory connections, allowing them to emerge, or it might force the brain to reorganize and rewire itself in response to the damage, and in doing so, accidentally create new, stable cross-modal links. It shows the adult brain isn't totally fixed.
Okay, so bringing this together, it's often described as this neutral neurological difference, right? Not inherently good or bad. But looking at the sources, it clearly comes with both some pretty powerful advantages and some definite challenges.
It absolutely is a double-edged sword, yeah. Though it's worth saying, many synesthetes report loving their experience and wouldn't want to be without it. But let's start with the upsides. The most consistently reported cognitive advantage is enhanced memory.
Because the extra sensation acts like a tag?
Exactly. It provides an automatic additional retrieval cue. If you're a grapheme color synesthete trying to remember a list of names, you're not just encoding the sounds or the spellings, you're also effortlessly encoding a unique sequence of colors.
Making it multisensory encoding without even trying.
Effortlessly. And research backs this up strongly. Studies show synesthetes remembering lists of words, phone numbers, dates, anything with a sequence they associate colors or spatial locations with much more accurately than non-synesthetes, especially over the long term. They might recall a list almost perfectly years later because the color sequence is still vivid, It's like having built-in mnemonics.
And we mentioned the link to creativity earlier. Is that a confirmed advantage?
The link is definitely there. Higher rates of synesthesia are consistently found among artists, musicians, writers, creative professionals. The hypothesis is strong. Creativity often involves making novel connections between seemingly unrelated ideas.
And the synesthetic brain is already doing that automatically.
Kind of, yeah. It's inherently wired to bridge different domains, sound and color, letters, and personalities. This neurological architecture might make it easier, more natural, to form unusual associations, to think metaphorically, to see connections others miss. Their brains are constantly generating these cross-modal links that non-synesthetes might have to consciously work to create.
And there are practical day-to-day aids, too, depending on the type.
Sure. For musicians with chromesthesia, seeing the colors of chords can genuinely help in analyzing complex harmonies or improvising. For those spatial sequence synesthetes we talked about, that built-in mental calendar or number line is fantastic for mental arithmetic, remembering appointments, organizing historical information.
Okay, but this constant extra layer of sensation can't be easy all the time. What are the downsides, the challenges?
The biggest one is often sensory overload or distraction. Just the sheer volume of extra involuntary input can be overwhelming or make it hard to focus.
Like trying to read with colors popping out.
Exactly. Imagine trying to concentrate on a dense textbook or an important report while the letters themselves are visually noisy, rioting with color. Or trying to follow a spoken conversation in a room with background music, if that music is constantly generating vivid, distracting shapes or colors in your vision. It can be mentally exhausting.
And for some of the rarer types, the challenges seem even more specific and difficult.
Definitely. We talked about lexical gustatory synesthetes avoiding words because they taste bad. Think about that in a professional meeting. Or consider a child in school. If their innate, unshakable color for the number 4 is yellow, but the teacher always uses red flashcards and materials for 4.
That creates a conflict.
A real cognitive clash. It can cause confusion, slow down learning, lead to errors, and make concentrating on the math lesson incredibly difficult because their internal reality is fighting the external information.
And that mirror touch type, that empathy is one thing, but the constant feeling.
It seems particularly draining. While having that deep physical empathy sounds positive, the reality of constantly feeling the physical sensations of others, minor bumps, itches, pain, even just movement, can turn everyday social situations into a sensory minefield. It can lead to significant anxiety and requires immense cognitive effort just to filter and manage the input and maintain one's own sense of physical self.
Okay, this is all fascinating, but it raises a really practical question. How do researchers know it's real? How do you scientifically prove that someone is genuinely experiencing colored letters and not just, having a vivid imagination or remembering childhood associations really well?
That's a crucial question, and they have developed objective ways to test for it. The gold standard really relies on 2 main approaches. The first one is all about retest consistency.
Which goes back to that stability we talked about right at the start.
Exactly. It leverages that lifelong consistency. A researcher will sit down with someone who claims to have, say, grapheme color synesthesia and have them assign a specific color to every letter of the alphabet and numbers 0 through 9. They record these meticulously.
Using a color picker to get the exact shade?
Often, yes, to be very precise. Then weeks, months, sometimes even years later, they bring the person back and surprise them with the same test.
And a genuine synesthete.
A genuine synesthete will match their original color associations with incredibly high accuracy, typically over 90% consistency, often matching the exact shade perfectly. Their associations are stable because they are perceptual facts for them.
Whereas someone just making it up or relying on memory.
They just can't do it. Trying to consciously remember 36 arbitrary color pairings over a long period. Non-synesthetes, even if trying their best to be consistent, rarely score above 50% on retest. That huge gap in consistency is a very reliable indicator of genuine synesthesia.
Okay, so consistency is key. What's the other main test?
The other big one is a variation of a classic psychological test. It's called the synesthetic Stroop task.
Like the regular Stroop test where the word RED is printed in blue ink and it messes with your head.
Exactly like that, but tailored for synesthesia. So for a grapheme color synesthete, the researcher will show them letters printed in different colors of ink. Sometimes the ink color matches the synesthete's internal automatic color for that letter. That's the congruent condition.
So if their A is red, they see an A printed in red ink.
Right. But other times, the ink color deliberately conflicts with their synesthetic color. the incongruent condition. So they might see their red A printed in, say, green ink.
And what happens then?
What happens is interference. Genuine synesthetes are significantly slower and make more errors when trying to name the ink color in the incongruent condition when the ink clashes with their internal color. Their automatic synesthetic color perception interferes with the task of naming the physical ink color.
Because their brain is getting conflicting color signals.
Precisely. It provides powerful objective evidence that their internal synesthetic color is a real perceptual experience that competes for neural resources, not just an idea or an imagination. It proves the internal color has processing weight.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's pivot a bit towards the end here and look at the cultural side. This isn't just a lab phenomenon, it's clearly influenced art, music, literature throughout history.
Oh, hugely. It seems to have been a source of inspiration, or at least a unique lens, for many creative minds. Take the painter Wassily Kandinsky.
A famous abstract artist.
In a well-documented chromesthete, he experienced sound as color. His move towards abstract painting was deeply tied to this. He wasn't trying to just paint objects. He explicitly aimed to create visual equivalents of musical experiences. He even wrote about the specific sound or emotional quality of different colors, yellow being like a piercing trumpet, blue like a deep cello. His art was an attempt to paint music, basically.
And in music itself, you mentioned Olivier Messiaen, the composer.
Messiaen is fascinating.
Yeah.
He apparently had multiple forms of synesthesia, including complex sound color and possibly spatial forms, too. He didn't just hear music. He saw intricate colors associated with chords and harmonies, and he actively used this in his compositions.
How so?
He would describe specific complex chords, not just in musical terms, but in terms of the colors they evoked for him. Blue-violet rocks speckled with grayish blue, that kind of thing. He even titled one of his major orchestral works Chronochromy, which literally means the color of time, trying to musically represent his synesthetic fusion of time, sound, and color.
Amazing. And then there's literature. The novelist Vladimir Nabokov is a key example.
Nabokov is wonderful because he wrote about it so beautifully and explicitly. He was a confirmed graphene color synesthete. And interestingly, it ran in his family. His mother also had it, and so did his son, Dmitri.
A clear genetic link there.
Absolutely. And in his memoir, Speak Memory, Nabokov gives these incredibly detailed descriptions of his personal color alphabet. He talks about K being like huckleberry and like oatmeal, G, a vulcanized rubber brown, just exquisite detail.
And he even mentioned disagreements with his mother.
Yes, that's a lovely detail.
Yeah.
He recalls arguing with his mother about the color of certain letters because some synesthetic colors were different from his. It perfectly illustrates that intensely personal, subjective nature of the experience, even within the same family. Inheriting the tendency doesn't mean inheriting the exact same colors.
And just thinking more broadly, even for those of us without synesthesia, we use synesthetic metaphors all the time, don't we? Loud colors, sweet sounds, sharp tastes.
We do. Poetry and everyday language are full of these cross-sensory descriptions. It suggests that maybe even in typical brains, there are underlying connections or associations between the senses that synesthesia just makes much more explicit and conscious. Perhaps it's not an entirely alien phenomenon, but rather an amplification of processes that are subtly at work in all perception.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here? Studying synesthesia seems to tell us something profound about perception in general.
I think the biggest thing is that it fundamentally demonstrates there is no single, monolithic, normal way to perceive the world. Our realities are constructed, actively built by our individual brains based on their unique wiring. And that wiring can vary quite dramatically, leading to radically different yet perfectly valid and coherent perceptual worlds.
It really challenges that idea of our senses being completely separate modules.
Completely. Synesthesia provides hard neurological evidence that the boundaries are much more porous than we tend to think. All perception likely involves a huge amount of cross-sensory integration happening below the surface of our awareness. Synesthesia might just be the most vivid, conscious manifestation of that integration, an extreme point on a continuum that we're all on somewhere.
And it also gives us this fascinating glimpse into that really deep philosophical question of qualia, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Qualia, the subjective, what it's like, quality of experience. The redness of red, the sharpness of pain. Synesthesia puts it right in front of you.
How so?
Well, how can two people like Nabokov and his mother look at the exact same physical stimulus, the black ink forming the letter G on a page, and have such profoundly different internal sensory experiences? One sees rubbery brown, the other steel gray. The external input is identical, but the internal subjective reality of the qualia is completely different.
It really highlights the personal nature of consciousness.
It does. The fact that the synesthetic experience is so specific, so consistent for the individual, my A is this particular shade of red, and it always has been, yet so variable between individuals, offers a unique empirical angle on just how subjective and individually constructed our conscious worlds are.
So the ultimate message seems to be about the incredible diversity of human perception, all arising from variations in how our brains are connected.
Exactly. The patterns of connectivity fundamentally shape the reality we each inhabit, often in ways we're completely unaware of.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe mull over after this.
If we accept that early experience is something as simple as the colors of those alphabet magnets can interact with our innate wiring to shape the very specific details of developmental synesthesia.
Setting the color of A for life.
Right. Then what are the more subtle, pervasive, maybe unnoticed cross-sensory influences that might have shaped the perceptual reality of every non-synesthetic brain during development? How much of your own experience right now, your preferences, your memories, maybe even your creative associations, might be subtly influenced by sensory connections forged early on, connections you aren't even consciously aware of processing?